Hi, my name is Jimmy, and this is going to be a video on my doodlejump project. So before I begin, I'd like to talk a bit about my preamble here. In my project, I use this bitmap display configuration. In this mission, I reached milestone 3, and some additional notes is that instead of scrolling the screen, whenever the doodler hits the top of the bitmap display, I randomly generate 3 new platforms and display those to the screen. And now for a demonstration of the game. We're going to reach the second level here. As you can see, we just generated 3 new platforms and displayed them to the screen. We're going to reach the third level again and enter an illegal area. Now we just wait for the user to either enter R for reset or Q for quit. So we're going to enter in R to restart the game. As you can see, we initialize all the variables again and we can play the game again. So let's reach the second level again and enter an illegal area. So we can either enter in R or Q again to quit. Let's enter in Q to quit. As you can see, the program has finished running. So back to the code. To give a high-level overview on how I actually implemented the game, I store my doodler and platform data in registers, and I essentially have a big game loop that does some checks and updates the objects on the screen. So essentially I check for keyboard inputs, repaint the entire screen, generate the platforms, and draw the doodler. I have some more checks to see whether the doodler has hit a platform, see how high the doodler has jumped so far, and check if the doodler has entered an illegal area. So to talk about milestone 1, creating animations, in the game loop here, for each iteration of this loop, I have a dedicated register, S3, which stores a value that flips between +1 and -1, which essentially acts as a flag to control whether the doodler will be falling or jumping. We add this +or-1 register to the Y value of the doodler in each iteration of the main game loop to give it that falling or jumping effect. Every iteration we redraw the doodler, and that's how we create those animations. We also call a function to redraw the platforms in the main game loop. More on this later when I talk about milestone 3. So for milestone 2, the doodler is able to jump off platforms. This is done in my check platform collision function. Essentially how this works is that since I know the Y value of my doodler at all times based off a register value, I load in the color of the pixel that is directly below the doodler and check if the hex color code is the same as the platform's hex color code. And if it is, then we essentially flip the dedicated register to -1, which will then start to decrement the doodler's Y value for every iteration in the game loop. And when we redraw the doodler, it'll give it the jumping effect. One thing to note is that I keep track of how high the doodler jumps, so that if the doodler jumps, say like 18 pixels high, then we can make the doodler fall again. This is all handled by my jump height function. Also, to change directions based on input keys, I have a function which is called at the beginning of my main game loop. Since I store my doodler's X value in a register as well, whenever a key is pressed, say either J or K, I modify the doodler's X value in a register by either adding or subtracting 1. Then later on in the game loop iteration, when I draw the doodler, it will be drawn with its updated X value. This gives it the ability to change directions in the game. So as for milestone 3, in the Piazza post linked in the preamble here, Mustafa mentioned that instead of scrolling the screen, we can generate 3 new platforms and display them to the screen, which is what I'm doing here. So in the main game loop, I have a check for whether or not the doodler has reached the top of the screen. If it has, then I randomly generate 3 new platforms using syscall42 and display it to the screen. If it has not yet reached the top, then continue to draw the platforms at the same location. Also, at the end of the game loop, I have a check to see whether or not the doodler has entered an illegal area. For instance, if it has hit the bottom of the screen, then I branch to a loop that keeps iterating until R or Q is pressed. Pressing Q will just quit the game, but pressing R restarts the game. So by pressing R, we simply just branch to the top of the doodler code where we can reinitialize all our variables and data again so that the game can be played again. Pressing Q, we just do syscall10 and exit the program. So due to time constraints and other course load, unfortunately I was only able to complete up to milestone 3. I couldn't complete milestone 4 and 5, but I'll talk about some difficulties that I faced when working on this project. So I think the hardest thing about this project was actually just starting out and planning everything out. I found the Piazza post that gave some starting tips very helpful. For instance, like first understanding how to draw like on the bitmap display the whole screen versus certain pixels based on X and Y coordinates, and then how to store data and update positions of your objects. I found those tips to be very helpful. Anyways, that is my doodle jump. Thanks for your time.